So anyway, I put this this slideshow together really to give a few messages to developers, because what I see is happening in Jakarta is typical of an emerging city in a developing country, right? And so what? Let me. It'll unravel. It'll unravel. So here we are, chapter 1. Cities. A quick thing about cities. We've all read a little bit about cities and how everybody's going to cities, and how now 50% of the population of the world live in cities. But there's more aspects to consider about cities. I actually think they are the crucible of creativity and thinking. And right back to Sumerian times, the first cities, you can see that we came out of of an agrarian sort of culture, and we started making places where we stayed, and that freed up certain people's time to do what? To think. And with thinking comes creativity. Now, these cities are concentrated in locations, and this is a map of coral reefs. I've read a paper a few years back which drew the analogy between cities and coral reefs, because you've got big sea all around, but these little coral reefs are clustered and they're very intense, and what happens, it contains 90% of the life of the sea in the coral reef. And all the area around, all this blue stuff, it's got the odd whale and some dolphins and other stuff and some plankton. But here's where everything happens, from the little plankton to the big eels, and that's the diversity and creativity. So I like to draw this analogy with cities, because everything is there, and you can just walk down a street and you'll see, you can write a book just from that journey. I think especially so in Jakarta. There's such a rich street life and street texture to Jakarta. And here comes chapter 2. And I think most of the people in the presentation I gave a few weeks ago recognize it's still a bit older than you. But this is from a film, and I'd recommend to see it because it's a really good, funny film, right? Where these guys, this is the mad professor, they travel into the future with this funny car. And I mean, apart from just being a fun film, Hollywood invented in its mind, so what had to predict what would be in the future, and they had all sorts of things like hoverboards, like skateboards, that you just hover around on, And this was 2 weeks ago. So 30 years ago, they said in 2015, this is where we'll be. Right? Now we haven't quite got the hoverboards, right? But we've got Segways, we've got handheld computers, we've got a lot of amazing things. Actually, the film didn't envisage or predict. And so it started getting me thinking, oh my God, I have now been in the business of architecture for 30 years. And because that's when I was a student when this came out. And one of my projects at the time was this. It's in a place in London called Hoxton Square. And yeah, Hoxton Square, I don't know if you've all heard about it, but it's in the East End of London, and it's a run-down, dirty, violent place. You don't want to go there, right? Or you didn't want to go there when I was a student. We were told, don't go at night, they'll take everything off you, and if you're lucky, you'll get away. So we went in the daytime, and we did a project for it to explore the possibility of urban regeneration. What could this be like? With these beautiful old buildings that are completely, nearly derelict. What could it be like? And so we applied our brains to thinking, yeah, I think this could be a great street with planting and all the rest of it. But how would it achieve that? How would it ever become like that? This is the same place today, right? And the average value of these apartments and these offices, believe me, it's huge. I mean, it's like, you can't get a small apartment here for £500,000, which I don't know what that is in euros. It's about 700,000 US dollars for a small apartment, right? Really small, tiny, actually. So it's crazy. The values have gone up. This is a beautiful square. They have entertainment there. They have great pubs, cafes. It's like one of the trendiest places to be in London. And I'm looking now at Jakarta, and this is, where is this? No, this is London still. This is London. Here's the texture of Covent Garden, which is another example of what used to be really run down and just not a brilliant place to be. But now Covent Garden, everybody knows Covent Garden, and it's branded. You have things like Neal's Yard, cosmetics, and all this sort of stuff. Neal's Yard used to be a flea pit. It was horrible. And when I was a student, it was actually really trendy. It was starting to come up, and there were a few things happening. And now it's actually gone, in my opinion, maybe a little bit too far. It's kind of gentrified. It's lost its edge. But there's plenty of places in London that have that edge. And it's full of the sort of delights of a city. You go downtown, there's acrobatics, there's shows, meet people. It's pedestrianised. There's the traffic that's all been pushed out to the sides. It's a really nice place to hang out and be. And this is the typical street scene in Covent Garden. The beautifully restored buildings. It's very organised. Recognize this building? Yeah. Well, could that one day be like that again? Restored. And here was subliminal message number one to the developers, because there's some developers in the room, and this is what I'm talking about. Because the typical pattern, what's happening now in Jakarta. Jakarta is quite a chaotic city. You get the street light that is. It's got a dense texture. It's quite messy, but quite organised. It's like organised chaos, I call it, right? The streets are just great places to be. There's always a photo opportunity. There's guys hanging out, and they're smoking, and they're chatting, and they're talking, and it's a fun place to be. And there's even the beginning. I love cycling. I cycle everywhere. I've got lots of bicycles, and there's even the beginnings of a bicycle path, and that's cropping up more and more in Jakarta. So, where was I? Yeah, the message I'm trying to tell. That's okay. It gives me good exercise, right? Is that you've got this very dense textured, low relief pattern, and then with the main the main roads that are coming in, developers are buying blocks, and they put in a really nice oasis, I call it, right? It's a little oasis. It's a mall with offices. It's a smart place to be. You go in, it's fancy shops, it's air conditioned. It's a very different place from the street, and it pushes. If you imagine the city as a fabric, when you put something in, it pushes all the rest out to the sides, and I think this is hurting the city a little bit. And we need to find a way to integrate that texture, bring it back into what they're doing with these oases, and combine it, rather than just push it out, because it's making the chaos in all of this area more. You're densifying it and making it worse. Icon building. They want this flashy tower, and they said it's got to be iconic. And what is iconic? Iconic means it's one of a kind. It's really, really special. But when you get everyone of one of a kind and really, really special, nothing special, right? And there's this obsession with a tower that's iconic. But actually, I think an icon can be the term can be applied to a much broader range of urban elements. All of these are the waterways and the canals of Jakarta. And I think this is an icon of Jakarta that is totally underutilized, and people aren't even starting to think about this yet. Little seeds are being planted. But if this was in a developed country, all the premium real estate would be next to these areas, right? And for those of you who've been to Singapore or Seoul, I'm going to show some examples. Singapore has this place called Bishan Park that used to be an old canal, right? A concrete canal, similar to Scotland. Now they've changed it. They've changed it into a park, and everybody wants to be there. Before, nobody wants to be there. Divided the city. You couldn't cross it. It was a bit smelly. And now they've cleaned the water. They've integrated it as a park, and it's a really nice place to be. And this is what's going to happen to Jakarta. And this is what I want to happen to Jakarta, and this is what I think you want to happen to Jakarta, right? This is going to make it a very nice place. And everybody's saying, no, never happen. Yeah, and this is, and when we live in a city, and we live in one place, our vision becomes narrow, right? Because we're just in it. We're in it. We can't just like pop out and have a look around. But you know, and now I see myself as privileged because I live in Singapore. I just come here every 2-3 weeks, and I see it, and I can see what's going to happen. And so you've got to put your head out the water and say, yeah, this is what's going to happen. And we have a collective responsibility as architects and designers. It's everybody's responsibility to try and make something like this happen. I'm not saying this is the only thing that's happened, this is one of many things. But because whether we even just think about it, or whether we talk about it, or whether we actually become part of, you know, conversing with other people about it, and perhaps managing to influence a project around it, little by little we'll get to this point where I am so confident that Jakarta is going to be one of the greatest cities of Asia, right? And so these are the waterways, and this is an asset that Jakarta has because it's like an alluvial plain. Yeah, all these rivers flow like fingers to the sea, the coastline, and this is the other asset, the coastline, which is totally underused. Barcelona, New York, many cities in developed countries on the sea, on rivers. These are the most expensive properties, the most desirable properties that you can think about. But here at the moment, it's kind of undervalued. Nobody really wants to be there. Why? Because it's not looked after. It's smelly. People think of flood risks, all this sort of stuff. But we can fix that. We can fix it. And you know, one of the reasons I'm concentrating on it is because one of the developments we've done as Atkins is the Regatta apartments. I'll show you an image, and that's right on the peninsula here. And the value of those apartments is very low compared to the value of the apartments in the centre of town. So it's the other way around now, and this is typical of an emerging city. I remember when I was in Madrid in the early 90s, I went to live there as a student, and nobody wanted to live on the penthouses, on the roofs of the buildings, because it was hot and uncomfortable. And I said, no, but this has got the views, it's beautiful, you can overlook the plazas, who cares about heat? We've got insulation, we can do things. Now, you know, yeah, everybody wants to be on the penthouses, and none of us can afford to be on penthouses now, as architects probably. Maybe some of you've got rich dads. Anyway, so here we are, here's a pattern of the waterways. And I'm going to take one as an example. So this little one down here, which is right downtown in prime real estate area. I think this is probably one of the most expensive places in Jakarta. Okay, and this is the photo of the basin we're going to look at. That is the size of a big mall office block. You know, if that was land available to a developer, it would be worth billions of them. And that's what it is. That's what it is. And I every time I come here, I stay in a different place, and I walk around the city. I do what most people don't do here. Everybody jumps in a car. But I like to walk around cities. I would cycle here if I wasn't too scared. I'm not used to the traffic here. But this is what it is, and it's like, I walked along here and I thought, oh my God, I don't want to be here. This is not a pleasant environment. You've got very defensive cages and barbed wire, and it stinks, you know. I've heard that this is actually a holding tank for sewage treatment, right? How can that be, you know, in an area, downtown, in a city where the real estate, you know, is commanding these sort of prices? It's got to change. It has to change. And it doesn't take a lot to change it. You need to clean up the water, and this is not a big exercise. I've learned this from, Atkins is a sort of multidisciplinary company. We do water engineering and environmental treatment and all the rest of it. And they've done it in Bishan Park. Actually, the consultants in Bishan Park, there's a German company called Dry Cycle, and I engaged with them on another project in Malaysia. And it's not a complicated thing. The amount of cost you would need to apply to clean this up and start making it into a park is a tiny, tiny fraction of the value of the increase of all the surrounding property, right? So this is my message number 2 to developers. Start thinking about this, because if you make this good, your surrounding properties are going to increase in value, and that's not only cost, it's a value thing, right? There's the difference between cost and value. You have to define. Cost is what you have to pay for it, but the value is what it gives you. And it can give to the whole public, everybody can benefit from it. And this is another view, also a huge. This river is connected. I can see this river as a spine park in the center of Jakarta, where you can walk right from downtown all the way to the coast, uninterrupted, pedestrian, nice paved areas, grass, green, trees, good water, And I'm going to show you some examples of where this is actually happening. And there it is as the aerial shot. There's the basin. Here's the river. What an icon that could be in Jakarta.